before they speak. And our first speaker is Peter Burt, who's a researcher with Drone Wars UK. And for anyone who's not aware of this organization, I strongly recommend a good look at their website, which will take you quite a lot of time because it's full of incredibly important information. And I think the emphasis on drones of this evening is very important because in a way, drones exemplify the normality of what we call the forever wars. And it's the use of drones in which a man or a woman sitting at a computer in some faraway place can choose assassinations and destroy countries. And so I'm extremely pleased and interested to hear from Peter. He's done a lot of research on the links between the American and UK Reaper drone, which is a particularly dreadful thing. But he's also focused on the new technologies, which, as you know, our Prime Minister is now extremely keen that our defense capabilities in this new area should be very much beefed up. He's also, unsurprisingly, worked on research into UK nuclear weapons. So I think I will turn over there now to you, Peter, and he will be sharing his screen with us for various pictures and graphs. So Peter Burt, over to you.
Right. So thank you very much, Victoria. That's very kind of you to introduce me like that. And particular thanks to Haifa and Zainab and all friends from Tadhamun Iraqi Women's Solidarity Group. And hats off to you for all the work that I know you've done over so many years, campaigning for peace and supporting and showing solidarity to so many people all the way across the Middle East. Well done for all your work. What I'd like to do is to talk briefly about how drones have changed the war is fought and why that's problematic, and look at some cases from the Middle East to highlight the dangers of drones. And I'd like to claim the credit for this talk, but I can't. It's been adapted very much from a talk given by my colleague, Chris Cole. So he deserves all the praise for anything that you might like to say, not me. So I know not everyone is particularly interested in the technology, so I'll try to keep this side of things very quick. Just to explain what drones are before we start. Drones are basically unmanned aircraft. There are many different types, many different sizes of them. The most infamous of them is the Predator Reaper drone family, which you can see a picture of in the bottom right-hand corner of the slide. So although we often describe them as unmanned, they do in fact still have a pilot, but the pilot works remotely and usually sits thousands of miles away, flying the aircraft from the USA or the UK from an airbase in the Middle East. So what that means is that the aircraft can loiter. It can stay above the same area of ground for hours and hours and hours while the crew have a shift change in between. And that means it can hang around and it can wait for people and it can wait for them to come out of hiding and then target them, which is one of the problems with them. So I'm going to be talking about military drones. At the current time, there are roughly 20 armed military drone states operating. The United States, Israel and China are top of the list of manufacturers, but there are plenty of others emerging as well. And Iran and Turkey in particular have used drones very destructively in warfare over recent years. So let's talk about how drones are changing warfare. And I've put here 4 main reasons why they're doing so. Firstly, they make it easier for politicians to go to war. Secondly, they transfer the risks and costs of war away from soldiers towards civilians. Thirdly, they allow targeted killing to take place with ease. And fourthly, the way that they are presented allows their advocates to say that war is precise and clean and moral. So I think all of those areas are problematic. Let's look at them in a bit more detail. You probably have seen many headlines like this over many years from the popular press. Sadly, there is a groundswell of support in the press and in politics and among some sections of the public for using war as a way of resolving international problems. However, although some people are keen to go to war, they're less keen to see military deaths during war. Drones are seen as an easy fix for this. Pilots flying drones are not in the theatre of war, so they're not at risk. It makes it easier for politicians to fight war without soldiers dying. However, people still do die. The risks, of course, are transferred to civilians rather than professional soldiers. I mentioned targeted killing, and you may remember early last year that the US assassinated the Iranian general Qasem Soleimani in a drone strike. And this was seen as a step into new ground when a state official was assassinated by a US drone. But actually targeted killing has been going on for many years, unremarked. Hundreds of individuals have been assassinated in a number of countries in drone strikes, often on only circumstantial evidence that they may be involved in terrorism. And the UK has conducted drone strikes. It's used a drone to kill Rayad Khan and other ISIS terrorists, although we don't know all the details of what's happened in some of those cases. Now, Israel has had a major role to play in this and has long used assassination as a political and military weapon. And here's a quote from the head of the former International Law Department of the Israeli Defense Forces. The first part of the quote is the most important part. If you do something for long enough, the world will accept it. The whole of international law is now based on the notion that an act that is forbidden today becomes permissible if executed by enough countries. And what we've seen is that countries like Israel and the United States have got their lawyers to argue that within bounds, it can be lawful to kill people in this way in a deliberate attempt to water down international human rights law. Now, this opens the door very dangerously to a new practice that puts all kinds of civilians at risk in war theatres and has been enabled largely by drone technology. Now, there's a myth that drones are very precise and allow surgical warfare that only targets military targets. The popular press gives this illusion that drones kill, the phrase they use is the bad guys and nobody else. But the reality is there's no such thing as a fully accurate airstrike. And for a long time, the United Kingdom has taken the position that no civilian casualties have resulted from over 1,500 airstrikes that it's conducted in the war against ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Now, there's been skepticism about this claim, even from some generals, not just the press and people like Drone Wars. So the RAF went away and looked again at its figures and said, okay, well, actually, we did kill somebody. We reported the death of one civilian. You might not think that's credible. I certainly don't. And the reason for that figure is basically because the British Armed Forces are not looking for evidence of people who they may have killed. Their evaluation of their bombing is quite poor in relation to that of other states like the United States, which to its credit has admitted that it's killed over 1,000 people in such strikes. Our friend organisation Air Wars have conducted detailed tracking of civilian casualties. They've criticised the United Kingdom's evaluation methods, and they've documented over 7,000 deaths, possibly up to 11,000 deaths from all the coalition airstrikes during the war against ISIS. Here are some pictures showing some of the horrific aftermaths of some of those strikes. We also see from studies in other parts of the world, in Gaza, this paper was published in 2019 in the Lancet Medical Journal, and showed that there was a high prevalence of drone-related amputations and severe injuries among casualties in the Gaza conflicts. And the doctors who did the work said that, quote, their work challenges the claim that armed drones minimize so-called collateral damage. The Daily Telegraph has also reported a study from Gaza, from the Al-Mazan Center for Human Rights, looking at casualties from the 2014 Gaza war, which showed that drones killed 37% of over 2,100 Palestinians killed during the war, including a large number of children. And Reprieve, another human rights group, have done some research looking at United States drone strikes in Pakistan, aimed at targeting 41 specific named individuals who the US were targeting. Those strikes actually killed in total over 1,100 people, 28 unknown civilian casualties for every intended target. Despite the war against ISIS being declared over by Iraq and Syria, and despite the US closing its headquarters in the war in the Middle East, the United Kingdom is continuing to conduct strikes in the Middle East. And we're not allowed to know the details of where or why the drones are flying out there. No announcement has been made to Parliament about this, and all parliamentary questions on the matter have been refused to be answered. Drone Wars asked Clive Lewis, Labour MP, to write to the Secretary of State for Defence about the matter. He received a reply, but the reply was non-committal and refused to explain the reasons that the drones were still flying or what they were striking. This is important, I think, because few people in the United Kingdom, fortunately, have had first-hand experience of war. Drone strikes give the impression that war is clean and precise, and that the violence used is minimal and is morally acceptable. This all helps to try to sort of rehabilitate war, make war acceptable in the eyes of politicians and some elements of the media. Military solutions are accepted as acceptable ways for solving international problems. What we hear is that war is always for humanitarian reasons, not political or economic reasons. The final decision on going to war is often presented as being a legal decision made by lawyers, not politicians or generals. The climate is such that the military are presented as heroes who are above criticism, and criticising the decision to go to war is equated with criticising armed forces personnel themselves. Fear is also important here. There's an increased fear of terrorism, which is used as a pretext for going to war, regardless of the evidence that terrorism actually increases as a result of such strikes. And technology such as drones are seen as allowing a bloodless war, quite wrongly. I'd like to end positively by coming up with some alternatives to this. Clearly it's important to tackle the root causes of war and take global action, take a global welfare approach rather than a self-interested approach in resolving international conflicts. But at a local level, a personal level, there are various things that we can do ourselves, and I've set out 4 of them here. Firstly, I think it's important to listen to the voices of the victims. Despite the pressure that there often is to ignore them, let's pay attention to what's going on in the world. Secondly, don't be afraid. It's easy to be afraid, but fear is actively used to divide us and prevents us from acting. We don't need to be brave to act, we just need to not let fear overtake us in what we do. Then keep the faith, be optimistic. The world can and should and must be a better place, and we can and we will change it. And finally, challenge the underlying causes of violence. There are many ways of doing that, by being part of your community or by joining a peace group like Stop the War or Tadhamun, which I think brings us back to where we started. So I'll say thank you once again to Tadhamun for all your work, and please keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. That was a terrific tour de force, really, of pulling all these different points together. And I particularly appreciated the way that you ended with 4 positive points of what you can do. Because almost always when you do solidarity meetings, people say to you at the end, you know, what can I do? And you've given us some points. So thank you so much for that. That's really, really good, really useful. There's so many things I'd like to take up with you, and I'm sure lots of people will want to as well. But let's move on to our second speaker, is a Palestinian, Jehan Helou, who's a researcher and an activist and a member of the Palestine National Council. And she's been Assistant General Secretary of the Pan-Arab Women's Federation in Palestine, a director of the Tamer Institute for Community Education, and is one of the main founders and presidents of the International Board on Books for Young People in Palestine. She's going to talk a bit about that organization, IBBY, and she's also going to present some stories written by Palestinian children, which she has translated for us, and they're children who've been affected by drones. And I think that this completely goes to Peter's first point of what can we do, which is listen to the voices of people most affected, and particularly in this case, listen to the voices of the children. So, Jehan, over to you.
Thank you, Victoria. Good to see you after the corona. When Haifa asked me how I can participate in this session, immediately I said, let's ask the children in our IBBY libraries to write about their experiences with this deadly terrorizing weapon. Later, I regretted my hasty suggestion and panicked. There is limited time and the libraries have just opened after long corona closed down. Surprisingly, the response was quick. The stories came very expressive and depressing, telling us details we never anticipated. Every child was really and is really influenced by drones every day. These writings will give another vital dimension on the dangers of the drones on children and its psychological damages. What if they are the children of Gaza, the largest open-air prison in the world, enduring an oppressive siege imposed by Israel since 14 years on 2 million Gazans, majority refugees and grandchildren of refugees? Let me briefly introduce the organization behind these libraries. What is IBBY? Is the International Board on Books for Young People. Is a non-profit organization which represents an international network of people from all over the world who are committed to bringing books and children together. 80 national sections. IBBY is a non-profit organization basically based on voluntary work. Its activities and programs have grown remarkably since its establishment 68 years ago. One of its outstanding programs is the Children in Crisis Situation. It provides support for children whose lives have been disrupted through war, civil disorder, or natural disaster, thus cementing its goal that every child has the right to become a reader, mostly so if he is living in difficult, disrupted situation. IBBY added to its mission a pledge to protect and uphold rights of the child according to the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. Much to be found on the IBBY webpage. As for IBBY Palestine, or PBBY, we are happy to be part of this outstanding organization. Giving a voice for our children to express their agonies and hopes is part of a long experience. Children have the opportunity to express themselves freely and confidently without any interference or adult patronizing. If you surf our webpage, which you see, you can read touching, spontaneous stories on the aggression on Gaza, or during the COVID-19 stories, or children with special needs and others. IBBY established in 2008 two children libraries as part of this children crisis in the most dangerous and marginalized areas in Gaza, in cooperation with two local organizations. These libraries are warmly welcomed and embraced by the local community and are a safe haven for the children who love to join. Activities aim to encourage reading, critical thinking, and creative psychological activities. One of these libraries was completely destroyed in 2014 in the Israeli aggression. IBBY launched an appeal for reconstruction. I'm trying because to gain time. I really love these stories that came. The children wrote them by themselves in the library. Most of the ages of the children is between 10 to 12 years. And everyone had something very, very touching to say. I'll try to take part of what they wrote in these stories. Most of them say the titles were very, very strange. The cursed dawns, the moving death, whatever. Every day brings the terrible sound of the cursed drones. It follows us everywhere like a shadow, giving us headaches. It pollutes the environment, turning a land that was once green into a barren waste, soaked in the blood of martyrs, making orphans the children of Palestine. This is what the children are writing. They target children and they make children of incapacity and terror, like a candle that has become black ash. They talk about themselves as if they become black ash. Their innocent laughter turned into sadness and fear. I cannot forget the assassination of Baha Abu Ata by this cursed drone. His house turned to ash. The whole place became ugly. Baha Abu Ata was a freedom fighter. He was killed with his wife by the drone in November 2019. The moving death, that is the drone, bring us suffering. We call a drone Zannana in Arabic because it creates a very disturbing noise in our heads and kidnaps our soul like some terrorizing monster. I'll tell you a story about the drone. One day, I and my friends were having fun and playing hide and seek, when suddenly a rocket was fired from the drone near us where we were playing. We were terrified and ran home crying with fear. My mother told me not to cry because we will overcome the occupation, destroy the drones, and take back our rights. In all the stories, at the end, always either there is a plea for we have the right to live in safe places and a belief in their national rights and the freedom of their homeland. The drone is a noise in the ear that creates terror in the heart. Our heartbeats become faster with fear. This is what they say. Even when we just think about it and we say, we won't think about it. The Israelis will kill anyone on sight, even a little child. When the occupation forces come, we run away from our homes, from the evil force that has nobody. It takes away life. This is very touching. It's by a child called 12 years old. The drone takes away life. It is the one who took from me my brothers and my support who cared for me. It is the one who kidnapped my brothers before my eyes when I was only 5 years old. Every time I hear the sound of it in the sky, there is a hellfire, pain and suffering in my heart. It ignites the pain caused by parting with loved ones, and the existence of the sky terrifies me. It is the black cloud above our heads that brings upheaval. His two brothers were killed at the same time 7 years ago. One is 16 years old and the other is 14 years old. The librarian participated this is what part of what she said. The drone is the product of a Western industry intended to hurt humanity in time of war. The louder and the higher the sound becomes, the more we are aware of a targeted and planned assassination. We cannot trust the Zionists. Each person feels they are a target. Many of those targeted have been civilians or of no threat, as has been claimed. Others have been killed because they were near a targeted position. My 4-year-old son tells me, "Mom, make them stop. It's giving me headache." The drone has psychological, health, and social effects. The drone does not leave our sky. When I hear the sound of the drone as I am playing in the street, I am not scared. But when I feel it's close to me, as its sounds get higher, I hide in the room. I do not know why. Although it sounds won't change, but I feel that if something happens, I would be at home. When I was 5 years old, when the Israelis bombed the mosque, which is close to our house, I was always playing in the street with my friends when the drone bombed the mosque and the first rocket fell, on it. Ever since, I would hide and be scared when I hear the sounds. It sounds much more than before. Also, my cousin Suad hides, and we talk to each other through the closed window with signs so that the drone does not see us. Imagine how the fear, and she's laughing. I mean, she's joking about this, that she is talking. She talks behind the screens and signs. Maybe they are afraid that the planes see them. Another also very touching story. I am afraid we will fall martyrs. This story, she talks how her father and mother talk about their three cousins, Lama, Haya, and Ismail, who were martyred when they were bombed. I think it was in 2008, and we have it in our book, Gardens of Hope, about this. It was a big issue. The Israelis deprived them of life in seconds. They turned the life of my uncle and his wife to sadness. My mother says that all the country mourned them. After I heard this story, every time I hear the sound of the drone, which is always above our heads, my heart shivers. I am afraid that what happened to my cousins would happen to me. Even when I go to school, I do not go with my brothers. See why? When I hear its loud sound, I am afraid that if it hits us, we would all be martyred, and they would be sad for us. Imagine, she doesn't want to make her parents sad, that their children. How sensitive a child. She is thinking not to go all together to school, not to be killed like her cousins. I don't know, I'm not looking at the watch. I have time. Another one is, I wish the pilot feels sad. these stories are sensitive because they look at the enemy. Are they human beings? Can they feel sad as these children feel sad? So this story also is indicative. We used to act drama in school. Every time I would choose the role of the drone. Some of them choose the role of the resistant. I liked the role a lot because I felt I was the strongest. When I fired the rocket, they all died. But after they died, I would be very sad. I wish the drone could feel in order to know how sad it makes us feel when it bombs those we love. This is very imaginative, and it was amazing how this child wrote it. One day while sleeping, I dreamt that I was riding in the drone, and the driver told me to fire the rocket on the house of Abu Muhammed. So I started fighting with him, and he hit me and threatened to throw me off the plane if I do not throw the rocket. I saw them sitting on the balcony watching the seller of cotton candy. I got so much pain from being hit and was afraid from the Israelis. So I threw one rocket, but it became roses before reaching the house of Abu Muhammad, Ula and Samah and Mahmoud. They all would look at the sky at the drone and laugh. Each would gather roses and cheer happily. That day, as much I felt afraid, I was happy with the dream. Many titles, very interesting. A kind of chronic disease. Even how it interferes in the life of the children, not that they are afraid, but they feel even the simplest thing that they can enjoy is taken from them. For example, this one, he says, and others talk about it too, the electricity goes off a lot, and over and above the drone removes the signal of the TV. So no television, and we cannot play outside, and even there is no whiteness. The drone does not scare me as much as it makes me nervous. When I want to do my work, I get a headache and I cannot concentrate. What is harder is that education from afar needs more quietness so that I can hear the sound of the education video on my cell phone. The main thing is that most of the, I don't know, do I still have the time? Oh, I panicked because all the time I work. Most of the children were saying every child has, I am reading their writing, has the right to live in safety in a beautiful homeland without drones. One day we will return to our occupied land and be free of the drones. Our beautiful homeland will be full of quiet, calm, and happiness. There will be no noise. The main thing is no noise, no disturbance, no fear or terror. We hope one day to live in security. Our hope lies in you, our heroes, men of freedom. It is it is the right of every child to live in peace and security in a free homeland far from the sound of the drones. We will endure. The occupation maintains and renews these machines in order to get rid of our dear people. But the people of Gaza will resist and endure and liberate Palestine and our prisoners. They will restore our right to return. Our people are the people of redemption and struggle. The painful nightmare. Every day I would hear this sound, zen zen, we are scared of the rockets. It carries that and destroy houses and kill children, women, youth, and elderly. We live in a painful nightmare. I have the right as a Palestinian child to live in a safe, drone-free homeland. I think these stories, of course, these are excerpts, will be published either in a booklet or on our webpage, but it is a cry. I mean, I have been working with the children of Palestine for long years. I never thought, and maybe they take it for granted, that every minute, the child is traumatized by the drones, by the memories of children, children and people killed, by houses destroyed. These children, they have witnessed at least the last two wars. So what do we expect of them? So if we have to make a campaign about the drones, it is very important to really connect it to childhood. Those human rights, or those working for children's rights, they cannot ignore it, and it should stop, because drones are a real terror for the children. The good thing is still they have their humanity. They are afraid. They don't want their parents to be sad. They want some humanity in their in the heart of their enemies. But the main thing is they are hopeful, and they think they will get their rights one day. Thank you. Hello?
Thank you very much, Jehan. That was a really lovely, sad, but also warming evocation of how it feels when in Gaza you can always see the drones, even when you don't hear them. They're always there, that feeling of always being under threat. And I think these really poetic little stories. And we've got quite a few questions which we'll come to in the end about how these stories can be better known, and we'll come back to that. But I want to go to our third speaker now. She's an Iraqi teacher, Thuraiya Muhammed, and she's also a member of Tadhamun. And she's also a member of Hanwell Friends of Sebastia. Now, this is a small village quite near to Nablus, and Hanwell is in West London. And I think these twinning, it's a slight diversion from what we're talking about now, but in the spirit of Peter's, what can we do forward, I'd like to come back to twinning. And she's going to follow up on these stories of children and in Gaza and drones with reading a bit from a book called The Drone Eats With Me, which is diaries from Gaza, written by a Gazan writer called Atef Abu Saif. So Thuraiya, would you like to unmute yourself?
Can you hear me, Victoria? Okay, right. Hi, my name is Thuraiya Muhammed, and I would like today to present you the book, The Drone Eats With Me. It's diaries from a city under fire. That's from Gaza. And it is by Atef Abu Saif, and the foreword by Noam Chomsky. Now, the book is about this author who is also a teacher, he's a journalist, and he's a writer. He writes the diaries of the 51 days that Gaza was under bombing and destruction by the Israelis. That was in 2014, in July. It started on the 7th of July, and the people were fasting Ramadan. It is a very nice story, which is very humane and touching. He talks about his family, just like what Jehan was talking about. He has children, and they were subjected to the drones over their heads. And the drones seems, as the title says here, the drone eats with me, because the drone had this habit, or it was intended to fire, especially bombardment during iftar and during suhoor, because they were Ramadan. So every time they start to eat for iftar after fasting all day, the drones started to bombard them. And the missiles seem to be everywhere. Sometimes they feel it inside their homes. And people started to be frightened because of the unknown. And also during these days, progressively as the days go by, the people didn't know what to do. So some places near the family of the author. Now this is Palestine this is Gaza. Of course, it is on the coast and on the Mediterranean coast. And this is where the red circle is the Jabalia camp, where the author, his parents and his wife's parents, they lived during the 51 days of the war. They left their little flat just outside the camp Jabalia, and then they thought it is safer to go there. And of course, it wasn't only the war, not only drones, but the drones played a big part in the war. There were the F-16 warplanes, there were the tanks on the street, and there were the warships on the coast. I'm going to read some of a few lines from the book, just to give you a feel for the book. And this is when he was walking in the street at night, and he says, and he has to fix his eyes on the drone as he walks, in case the missiles will be fired, and he had to avoid them, or he thinks he can avoid them. He says, whenever I walk through the city at night, I keep one eye firmly fixed on the sky. A drone looks like any other star, hiding among the constellations. I can usually spot one, a tiny light. I tell myself that I have to look this monster in the eye if I am to see when he fires a missile at me. I have to see the missile as it drops out. It takes a few seconds to reach me, so that's how long I have to get out of there. To run under a tree and hope its branches would absorb some of the impact. I just have to be vigilant. I have to watch it as it watches me. I have to concentrate not to lose it to the darkness. If I run, I will look more like a reasonable target, a dangerous threat in motion. So it's really very close. Car will follow him, and that car will be a target, and he will be killed. It's very, very difficult situation. At another time, when he says, when after 51 days, the war stopped and they went back to their flat, he says, the drone welcomes us. Unsurprisingly, with their constant whirring all night long. I did my best to ignore them, which was hard. In the dark, you can almost believe they are in your bedroom with you, behind the curtains, above the wardrobe. You can imagine that if you wave your hand above your face, you might catch it in your hand, or even swat it as you would a mosquito. Journalist, when he tried to write an article in Al-Ayyam, the newspaper, he says, I write my weekly article for tomorrow's edition. And he said, hope is what you have, even at the worst of times. It is the only thing that can't be stripped from you. The only part of you, the drones, or the F-16, or the tanks, or the warships can't reach. The moment you give it up, you lose the most precious possession endowed by nature and humanity. Hope is your only weapon. It always works. It never betrays you. It never has before, and it will not this time, hopefully. So with this hopeful note, I finish my readings. Thank you. Or shall I continue or? Okay, thank you.
Perfectly on time, and thank you very much. It wrapped in beautifully, following on to Jehan's talk. I'd like to take some questions from the audience now. And the first one I'd like to take is somebody who's put two questions in. Pat Gaffney, can you unmute her, Zainab? She's got two questions there, and I just want to tell you that I know Pat, and she's part of one of these twinning initiatives, like the one you're in yourself, between Bethlehem and Kennington, part of London. So Pat, if you could put your question, and then slightly in response to Peter's "What can we do?" maybe you could say just a very few words about your twinning operation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I should also declare I'm a trustee of Drone Wars as well. So I have a real interest in the work of Drone Wars. Now my questions were about access to these stories. Wondering, obviously we've heard from one of our speakers there that there is a book published, but the first set of stories from Gaza, it was a question about how they might be made available. And I see that somebody online suggested it might be better to put them on an online platform, on a website, because they can reach more people, because they're great resources for groups and networks and campaigners. They're very valuable resources to use. And my second question was whether or not there are similar stories from the West Bank, because I believe the stories we've heard today are from Gaza. And I would be interested to know if there are similar resources that are being gathered from the experience of the West Bank. And then just very quickly about twinning. I'm chair of a Kennington Bethlehem. We have a link between Kennington and Bethlehem. And the model of twinning is a great one for local communities, secular church, women, schools, to forge links with villages and towns in the West Bank and in Gaza. And there is an overall umbrella organisation. I'll put the link to it in the chat box, the British Palestine Friendship and Twinning Network. They have a fantastic website, and all of the twinning networks in England and Wales and Scotland are listed on there. And there are a lot of good ideas about the value of twinning and what you can do. So as a very practical model for building solidarity, twinning networks are one such model. So,
thank you very much, Pat. Jehan, would you like to respond to those questions?
Yeah. These stories were written especially for this symposium, but of course we published all these stories on our website that we quoted, and we showed. So it will be available for everyone. And there are many similar moving stories during the aggressions on Gaza or the COVID. No, I mentioned a book which was before published, and we might publish them in a book, but basically they will be on our IBBY Palestine website. Of course, there are stories for children in the West Bank. When I was at Tamar Institute, and even till now, every year we have a program called My First Book. We call children to write their first story and to have another child illustrating the story, and it is published in a volume of books. But to be frank, Gaza children are more energetic in writing their books and writing their stories. But there are many, many stories by children.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mira, I don't know if everybody's looking in the chat, but just in case not everybody is, I just want to say we've got a very touching message from Stockholm, Mike and Bodil, saying, "I was deeply moved by these stories. Reminds me of the poster from the Vietnam era. War is not healthy for children and other living things. Thank you." I think that's a great quote from a different war. And it very much, I think, takes up the point made by Mike about how the inhumanity of these drone wars and the fact that they're much easier for politicians to go ahead with them because civilians in the West or on the Israeli side, the aggressors, the society can just kind of not really be aware of them. It's a new normality. And I think that is the very, very frightening thing that I was glad that you highlighted that, Peter. I don't know whether you would like to go back to some of what you were talking about, Peter, in terms of how the Israelis and the Americans are particularly the ones who are most advanced in the use of drones and the development of drones, and therefore the people most threatened by the use of drone warfare are people in the civilians in the Middle East. Zainab, could you unmute Peter? Zainab, can you unmute Peter? There you go.
Sorry, that was my fault. Zainab did unmute me, but I managed to mute myself again. So sorry about that, everyone. Well, yes, the story of the way in which drones developed is actually quite interesting. Drones are not new. They've been with us for decades. They were used since World War II, maybe even before then, for target practice as aircraft that didn't have any crew that were used for people to sort of practice shooting at. But they really sort of came into their own probably round about the beginning of the 1990s, 80s, 90s. And the main work that was done at the time to develop the Reaper drone, which has now become so infamous, was done by Israeli engineers who had worked in the military, understood and appreciated the potential of these weapons, and had wanted to sort of take things further themselves. So the developer of the Reaper drone originally was an Israeli. He sold out his company to a couple of brothers, the Blue brothers, their names were, and they set up the company General Atomics, which now makes the Reaper drone, and which worked with the United States Air Force to develop it from initially a small aircraft that was used for surveillance, which then developed to use laser targeting to pinpoint targets on the ground that other aircraft could attack. And then somebody thought, well, maybe we could arm the aircraft ourselves. So the drones themselves were armed and have gradually developed over time to become very formidable fighting machines. So at the moment, the United States is the leader in drone technology in the world. Israel, I think, has also done some very innovative work in military technology in this area. The Chinese have also perhaps to a large extent copied that, and a lot of their drone designs tend to be based on models that other people have designed. But the thing about drones is that the technology is relatively straightforward and relatively cheap to make and use, so you don't have to be kind of highly industrialized power to be able to use them. Iran, UAE, Turkey have all used drones in conflict. Turkey has used them in the war in Nagorno-Karabakh. UAE has used them in Libya. Iran has used them in various places. And also other groups like Hezbollah, for example, have also been able to manufacture their own drones and use them to a certain extent in their fight against Israel. So we have here a technology which is very sort of proliferation friendly, which is not a good thing, because it means obviously it's very easy for anyone to make and for it to fall into anyone's hands. So there is a need for the control of this technology. That's another story which I won't talk about now, but yeah, that's basically in a nutshell the sort of the way in which drones have developed.
Thank you very much.
If you're interested in this, I would recommend a book. I'm sure you're probably not, but if you are, there's a very good book by Richard Whittle called Predator, which tells the whole story from beginning to end and is very well researched.
Thank you for that. And one of the bits of that story is the work that Drone Wars is doing to try and make the government more accountable and to kind of cut through the secrecy. So I think there are various legal things being done on that front. And we've got two more questions in the chat. The first is it possible to try and have a program on the BBC or Channel 4 to show what the feelings of children towards drones are, and to show this to the whole world? I would just say in response to that, though the others, Jehan and others may want to say something. I think that the best thing that we can do is to do the kind of local activism that Pat was talking about, which is the only way that things get changed is if there's pressure on politicians to change their policies on these things. They know everything that's going on. They know what's happened to children, and what they're counting on is that ordinary people like us will continue to be quiet and a bit passive. And I think pressures on your local MPs, and there's nothing they like to see less than ordinary people like us turning up in their surgery, and instead of asking about a problem with our roofs or our cleaning or our something or other, we want to know what they are doing to prevent children in Gaza being terrorized by drones. And if enough people do that kind of thing, that is how you get pressure moving on this. And I strongly urge everybody to join, as Pat said, peace groups, or it was Peter who said, peace groups, Stop the War, Palestine Solidarity, or even better, I think, these small local groups in which everybody knows each other, and you can go together to your MP and give them help. It's also very good to work through trade unions. Many trade unions are very good on this issue. The second question I wanted to respond to myself before I asked the others is somebody asking about paintings by children related to drones and how good it would be to see these paintings. There are many, many paintings, and if you look at the Gaza Community Mental Health Project website, they have gathered up a lot of these paintings. And whenever they do an international conference or anything they do, they're always just filled with these incredibly beautiful children's paintings, which are so vivid and capture everything in the spirit of everything that Jehan has read to us. And now the third question that's come, which I think is probably one for you, Peter, is from Haifa saying, why are there no stories about drones from Iraq? So can I just...
So that's a blessing to have him around with us. Well, what I want to say is something about why we don't have stories from Iraq, because Iraq being one of the countries that also, I mean, sarcastically, we can say blessed with the use of drones and having the drones all the time in the air. So, and we have many, many civilians being killed by the armed drones. So this is an important question. Why don't we write about it? Why don't we hear about it? The human stories, it should be plenty of them since 2003. And again, from 2014, it's been intensified in big way in various parts of Iraq. I think the main issue here, probably could explain it, is not because it's becoming ordinary, familiar sight or they can hear it, but also because it's been becoming, it's being publicized, used by the media, by the military, as well as by the Iraqi government itself, that it is to protect the population rather than kill them, while it's killing them. So it's been manipulated, the whole issue of the drones, and especially when it's being used against ISIS. So it became like the weapon, an Iraqi weapon against themselves, which is very, very to justify what the use of it, even when it's killing people. Hence, I mean, the silence about it, even by journalists, Iraqi journalists or writers, which they're supposed to write about it or asking people to write about it, the minute they write about, they are immediately labeled or accused of being terrorist. So this label is very ready to be fitted whenever someone talks or write about the civilians being killed. This is a taboo issue at all, which is very, I mean, just writing about this, we have to take it on ourselves also to write about this side of the story. It's different. So Iraq, especially now by international law, it's not occupied. Iraq is not occupied, but it's being governed by a sovereign government. Yet we have the use of drones, the bombardment, everything, whether it is by the US-led allied forces or Turkey on the border or Iran. So despite this fact, we don't hear about it. This might be the only explanation I have. And thank you very much for all the panel. Fantastic evening. Thank you. Thanks, Victoria, for sharing. And that's it.
Have we got the patience just tells you, you will have Francesco Enuzella on the oud, Salim with vocals, and Azad Zangana on percussion. I think it will be a great evening, and I hope many of you will come, and many young people will be encouraged by Jason and others to come. So I want to say good night from all of us here on the panel, and great thanks to our three speakers. I think they were terrific. And please join us again.